Today is our final event in our spring series of What Matters to Me and Why. I'm Vanessa Gomez-Brake. I serve as the Senior Associate Dean of Religious and Spiritual Life here at the University Religious Center. The What Matters to Me and Why series represents a creative solution to an important problem in the university setting. It's that separation of intellectual life from the personal and the spiritual. What Matters to Me and Why offers the Trojan family an opportunity to hear from USC faculty and administrators in a different way. Rather than lecturing on just their area of expertise or research, we invite speakers to share their life journey with us. And so once a month, during this Wednesday lunch hour, we get to listen in as they reflect on the values, beliefs, and motivations that have shaped their lives thus far. Before I introduce our person who will be introducing our speaker today, I want to highlight just a few upcoming events on the Religious Life calendar. Perhaps one of the more exciting things is, how many have been to the Little Chapel of Silence? You have, okay. For a lot of students, it's a bit of a mystery. They don't even know it's there, but it's a nice tiny chapel attached to Town and Gown. And we have a student from Cinematic Arts who has done a documentary on it. And it's meeting to students, to staff, and faculty, as well as history here on campus. And so we get to screen that documentary here in the Fishbowl on April 30th. And that will be right before our burning ceremony, which is how we end each semester here at the Religious Center by speaking out prayers that were left in the Little Chapel of Silence, then having a bit of a fire to really lift up those prayers. So please join us the evening of April 30th for a documentary on the Little Chapel of Silence. And then lastly, our baccalaureate ceremony will be on Wednesday, May 14th. And so if you're around, even if you're not graduating, I hope you'll consider attending. It's always a great time. It's an interfaith service where we offer prayers for our graduates, and we have a student baccalaureate speaker and then a main baccalaureate speaker. And this year, our speaker will be Ariana Huffington. And so we're looking forward to hearing from her. All right, that's it for me and my announcements. I invite you all to listen deeply to today's speaker and consider asking a few questions during our Q&A period at the very end, which we'll reserve 10 minutes for that. And before I invite Greeley up, I want to say that I invited today's speaker sometime last year, and we were like negotiating dates and so forth, and I'm so glad that actually this is the grand finale for What Matters to Me and Why this school year. And it just worked out that April here at USC, we celebrate Asian American Heritage Month. And so I think Glenn Osaki is the perfect person to ease us into this celebration month. And so at this time, I want to invite a good friend of Religious Life, Ridley Harris III, to the podium. Ridley is the Director of Student Engagement and Inclusion Programs, specifically Strategic Partnerships under Student Life. So let's give it up for Ridley.
That title's too long. I'm working on it. Well, y'all, first off, good afternoon. I have just a pleasure and honor to introduce not only a great colleague, a great professional, but a good friend here and a good Trojan brother here at USC, Glenn Osaki. And when I think about it, I'm going to get to the official bio stuff.
Don't worry about the official.
If you all know that, you know that. You know that Glenn is doing a lot. But what I want to say is there's three words that kind of popped in my head when I think about Glenn. The first one is joy. I feel like Glenn operates in a space of joy. Whoever he's interacting with, whoever he's talking to, the spaces he's in, there's always that joy that comes with him. I also want, the other word I wanted to say that kind of encompasses Glenn is presence. And I've been saying, you cannot have a presence without being present. And if you all know Glenn, he is at everything. Right? I mean, he goes to everything. And that goes into the third word, which is support. Glenn goes to everything because he wants to support all of his Trojan family. He wants to support us and bring that joy. So thank you, Glenn, for always being in that space. And we're so excited to hear and learn a little bit more about you. And also, he's my brother in faith as well.
Amen.
So Glenn Osaki is a global communications expert and with nearly 4 decades of leadership in reputation and crisis management, public diplomacy, and international affairs. During his 6 years at the University of Southern California, I had to, Glenn has served as an SVP and Chief Communications Officer, a Senior Advisor to President Carol Folt for International Communications and Marketing, and now Director of USC's U.S China Institute, the USCI, and Strategic Director of the USC Center for Public Diplomacy. Prior to joining USC in 2019, Glenn served as Asian Pacific President for the MSL Group, the flagship strategic communications and public affairs consultancy, Paris-based Publicis Group. Or I'm probably saying that wrong.
That's good. It's close enough. Close enough.
My French is bad. A 32-year company veteran, Glenn was also based in Shanghai for 15 years, where he successfully architect a formidable development strategy that multiplied the 15 staff agency 100-fold to 1,500 employees in 41 owned offices through industry-leading organic growth and acquisition of 10 best-in-class agencies across the region. Under Glenn's leadership, and we want to highlight the leadership, the MSL Group became the largest PR agency network in Asia and the region's most awarded. So Glenn, you all has, and this is just some of Glenn's work, but Glenn has made a mark not only on this campus, but he makes a mark in individuals, whether it's with his colleagues and some of the staff and faculty, other administrators, but also with the students. So without further ado, I'd love to bring Glenn Osaki, my brother.
Thanks, Ridley.
Oh, good to see you guys.
Appreciate you. Wow, thank you so much, Greedley. Just a word about Greedley. He's one of these people that whenever you see him on campus, he just brightens my day. I don't have a lot of opportunities to work with him on a few of our Heritage Month events and some of our support for the affinity groups around campus, but I have to say that I just feel like he understands me and I understand him, and he lives a life of faith, and I really appreciate that. And thank you so much, Greedley. It's such an honor to be introduced by you. And I also want to thank Vanessa for this opportunity, and Varun and everybody. Hey, Fong. Good. Everybody at the University Religious Center, because of the work that you do. And I mean, you mentioned this earlier about the intellectual part, and we're a university, and so of course the academic, the head knowledge matters a lot, and that's what we're here for. But for me, and what matters to me the most is really the heart. And so because of the work that you do and how that you really work on the spiritual heart of the university and the emotional part, and that is such an important part that is often left out. And so that's what matters to me the most, and what you're going to hear about in my talk today. So let me jump right in. And I have a few photos that will bring to life a couple of the episodes or the examples that I'm going to share. And in my story, it begins with my parents. I think many of us, all of us, our stories begins with our parents. And this is my father. It's a little hard to see in the back, but my father, Katsumi Osaki, and my mom, Terio Mori. And like the overwhelming majority of families in the U.S., theirs is a very traditional immigrant story. They left their home country of Japan in search of a better life in America, and they came here to pursue the American dream. But my father was actually born in the U.S., and when he was an infant, my grandfather moved the family from California back to Japan. And this was just before World War II, and there were a lot of tensions in the world, and he felt that it was probably better for the family to be in Japan than to stay here in California. And obviously he was right, because when my father was 7, in 1941, the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. That's what ushered the U.S. into World War II, and that's what also caused the U.S. to intern 120,000 Japanese Americans who were innocent of any crime, but they were incarcerated into camps, and so they certainly would have been among those 120,000 if they had stayed. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that story at the end, so you'll see how this arc completes. But though he avoided the hardship of internment, there was a great amount of hardship that they experienced in Japan. And so after the atomic bombs were dropped on Nagasaki and Hiroshima, hey Walt, no problem. My family often, my father in particular, would talk about how difficult it was in Japan. So famine and disease, lack of basic necessities, a lot of suffering. But my father was determined, and his siblings, to move back to the United States. So like many of these great immigrant stories, as soon as the family earned enough money for one boat ticket, the oldest in the family, it was a girl, she moved to California. And then she worked in California as a maid, as a schoolgirl, earned enough money to buy another boat ticket, and then the second sibling came over. And then the two of them worked together, and then two more came, and my dad was on that group. And so eventually, all 9 of the siblings and my grandparents moved back to the United States. So the story about my mom's situation is a little bit different because she grew up in Tokyo and was actually part of a higher class of family. In fact, her family was descended from samurai. It's actually a kind of a well-known family, the Mori clan. And so she was able to come to the U.S. As a high school student. And then they met and married in San Francisco. They faced obviously a lot of discrimination, and we hear a lot of stories about families that were growing up during that time from different parts of Asia that were here and were not welcomed, particularly a Japanese. And I actually didn't hear about a lot of these stories until my dad was really late in his life, and he was really remembering a lot of those stories that he had hidden or he had kept from me. But the discrimination that my mom faced wasn't just here in the US, but it was also in Japan, because she chose to marry my father, who was from a lower class. He was from a farming class. And during those days in Japan, that would never have happened. And so when my mom and dad fell in love and got married, my grandparents disowned her. They would have been happy if she would have married somebody from the US, someone from Mexico, someone that was African American, someone that was Chinese. Anything else would have been okay, except a Japanese that was below your class. And so it really wasn't until my sister and I were born that my grandmother kind of accepted my mom back, and then eventually she started coming to the U.S. Because of the grandkids. So the discrimination was something that my mom experienced on a couple different levels. And so anyway, I was born and raised in San Francisco. My parents instilled in me this love for America as my home, and I just really wanted to assimilate, like many Asian Americans during those days, assimilate into the American culture. So I rejected the Japanese language and the Japanese food and the Japanese culture and pretty much everything because I wanted to fit in here in the US. So now let's fast forward actually all the way into my college days, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about my immediate family. And so this is a photo of my wife, Tricia, and I. So we met as undergrads at UC San Diego, and then we got married while I was a graduate student here at USC in public relations. This is my daughter, Charisse, our oldest. She graduated from USC in May of 2014. She was then followed by my son, Daniel. He graduated from USC in May of 2016. And our third child is actually a student here at USC today. This is Rachel in her convocation robe, not her graduation robe. That doesn't come until next year. And Rachel is actually in Tokyo this week. So with the East Asian Studies group in the back, and particularly Caitlin, they've been really helpful in her. And so she is spending this semester at Sophia University. And then our fourth child is, she's in high school right now, so she's a senior. So we'll see where she ends up, but with, I don't know, with her siblings at USC, I don't know. She has her choice, so we'll see what happens. But anyway. And then the last photo here, this is a photo of us as our family in Shanghai in May of 2019. And so, as Greeley mentioned, we spent 15 years based in Shanghai. And I think that, on the title it says Trojan Family, Traveling Family. I actually can't think of a family that I know that travels more than my family. We have a tremendous love for international culture and international people, all nationalities. It's something that we were able to gain by living those 15 years in China, but traveling internationally. I mean, I travel every week. I mentioned that Rachel is in Japan right now. Charisse just got back from Finland the week before, and Daniel had spent the previous 2 weeks in Indonesia. So these kids are just always traveling, and I'm excited about that, and I'm happy that they will always continue to love understanding and appreciating other cultures. And this was also something very important to me, as you'll see in my career. But with all that, I would say the single most important thing beyond our love of the USC family and of international travel is the focus of our family is on God in our faith. And so we raised our kids to follow God, to be Christian. And I'm going to now turn to my faith part of this presentation. And what I want to do is use a story that I think really sheds light on this one episode. There'd be many that I could talk about, but this one in particular. And it's not a story that really starts with joy. In fact, it starts with a lot of pain and suffering. And the next picture that I'm going to show is actually a very difficult photo for, my wife in particular to see. I actually looked for it a few weeks ago. We hadn't seen it in a couple decades. But let me share this photo with you, and you'll see why. Okay. So it might be hard to kind of read in the screen, but this is a photo of my first car, a Toyota Tercel, and I was hit by a drunk driver on the freeway. It was head-on in 1988. I was coming back from work that night, and by the grace of God, I was saved. It's hard to tell from the photograph, but so I was hit here on the driver's side front, and the entire front, the steering wheel and the instrument panel, everything went over into me. But the bucket seat that I was sitting on broke back at the force of the impact, and the seatbelt pulled me into the back seat cavity. So I was in a fully reclined position while the rest of the instrument panel and the steering wheel went forward. So if I had been seated normal, it would have just gone through me. In this case, it went over the top of me. And I had some internal injuries, a lot of other injuries, but I survived the crash, and that's probably the greatest miracle. But there were several more miracles that followed. So at the very moment of my accident, my wife Tricia had this, just was overcome with exhaustion. And my mother-in-law, who was staying with us at the time, she told her that she was really worried about me, and my mother-in-law said, "Oh, don't worry, Tricia. Glenn always works late. He's perfectly fine." And she said, "Well, I don't know, but I just don't feel right." And so she went into her room and she prayed. And she remembers this prayer to this day vividly. But she essentially said, "God, I know that you give and you take away, but please don't take my husband from me tonight." And so she then fell into this really deep sleep, and she woke up about 2 hours later when the hospital called. And as soon as the phone rang, she knew, and she knew that I'd been in an accident. And when she answered the phone, she asked the person on the phone, "Is he alive?" So she just knew. And they said, "Well, his vital signs are stable," something like that. Not really reassuring, but she knew that I was alive. And, I'd have to say that the rest that she had that was really great, because she had many sleepless nights that followed. And this pattern of constant prayer for many people really aided in my recovery. So, when you look at these photos, and it looks pretty bad, but my wife said that it was just worse in person. It's just this mangled mess of metal. And so one story, she went to the junkyard some days later to see if there were any things that I'd left behind, and she asked the manager of the junkyard to see the car that was brought in on this date, and then the manager could tell that that this was probably the spouse, girlfriend of the person that was in it. And she said, and he said to her, "Ma'am, I can take you there, but it's a really difficult thing to see. I don't think that you should go, and my sincere apologies for your loss." Because he had never seen a crash that bad and just assumed that there was no way that someone could have survived it. And then Tricia told him, "Well, actually, he's alive," and that guy couldn't believe it. Coincidentally, there was actually another thing that happened. So my wife was a school teacher, and that night when she learned about my situation, she called the principal and told them that she's going to have to take a couple days off, and so he went and found a substitute teacher. Turns out that the substitute teacher that he called was somebody that was a parent of someone in the class that my wife was teaching. And when he heard about the reason why he needed a substitute, he immediately rushed over to the hospital. And he was a pastor. And so he stayed that night with my wife praying, and until he had to leave in the morning to go teach her class. And also, very interestingly, his wife was a nurse practitioner. And a couple of days later, she was talking to the doctor that she works with about this accident that had happened. And the doctor said, "Oh, I was on the freeway that night, and I drove past that accident, and I pulled over because I wanted to offer support, but I saw the firemen there and the jaws of life trying to get the body out, but I knew that there was no chance that anyone was alive, and so I left the scene." And so when she told him that actually the person driving the car, me, had survived, he couldn't believe it. So there was a lot of reinforcement about God's protection to me at this moment, and that was remarkable. But the healing that followed was probably even more miraculous. So through the accident, and I had a lot of problems, but the worst thing was my leg had shattered. The bone had broken, it snapped, and it was, I think the doctor said that I'd lost like 2 or 3 inches of bone in that leg, and my leg was going to be shorter. And so what they did is they put a metal rod in the leg here from the knee to the foot, and what they did is the rod was there, and then the bone fragments that they could find or that were still there, they put the rod into it, and they left gaps. So there's some bone, and then a gap and more bone and some more gaps, with the hope that the bone would regrow and refill that space. But after a few weeks, it really wasn't working like they had hoped, and so they had suggested to my wife that, well, Glenn needs another surgery. We might be able to take some bone from his good hip, because I had a bad hip. I had dislocated a hip in this accident. And then she felt like, well, I don't know that we can do that. He's weak. He's been through so much. Do you think it'll be successful? And but she remembered a Bible verse. I think it's from the book of James. And in that Bible verse, it says, to take your sick to the elders of the church, to pray for them and anoint them with oil. So we're like, okay, we have nothing to lose. Let's try that. And I mean, we believe the Bible. But so we went to church and we had that all done, and nothing really happened. There was no miracle or anything there. But anyway, we did that and then went home. But that night, I experienced this tremendous fever. So my body got really hot, and I was sweating profusely. And I remember my wife thought that I had wet the bed. It was, so wet, and I didn't have really good control of my bodily functions at this time, so it probably was, she thought it was kind of normal. But that the heat of my leg was really, like, she did reach down and she felt it. She said that night, but it felt really hot. But again, we thought, well, a lot of trauma to the bone, and maybe there's infection, could be anything. And so we kind of just went on, and then it wasn't until I think 4 or 5 days later when we had our next appointment to get an x-ray. And when the doctor x-rayed the leg, he couldn't believe what he saw, because the bone had now started to grow. And when he measured my leg, it was the same size as my left leg. So it had grown like 1.5 to 2 inches. And to this day, my leg is fine, and it was really a miraculous healing. Now, I don't know why God will sometimes will save someone, but another, or someone might experience healing, but another doesn't. But all I know is that, in my case, I really believe that God had a reason for me to be able to survive that crash and to be able to, have my leg grow back, and that there was a purpose for saving me. And so, I've always felt that besides serving my family, which is my priority, he had me survive to provide support for others. And throughout my work life, I feel like I've had a purpose. And it's why in this part I'm using the phrase my calling as opposed to my career, because it's more than just a career, or it's more than just work. And I think Gridley mentioned in the introduction, I've been here at USC for about 6 years, and I worked internationally for a PR firm. There's one part of it, though, that I wanted to share with you, which I think is really the motto that I use, kind of the words that I live by. And it became a slogan for our firm in Asia. And so it's this, win with heart, be the change. So this is a slide from a deck that I'd created years ago for the firm that I was building in the region. And, there were different aspects about it. We wanted to really care for people. We wanted to be purpose-oriented, passion for client service. We recognized that we needed to build trust, and it's something that you do through integrity, and you do it every day. So, and there were some various operating principles that were part of it. But at the center, is this phrase, win with heart, be the change. And let me just explain that for a second. I mean, many are familiar with the quote from Gandhi, be the change you want to see in the world. And that essentially tells us that, okay, the world isn't perfect. There's always going to be problems. But if we want it to get better, if we want to see solutions, then we need to do that work. You know, there's an action bias that we need to do what we can and hopefully allow others to follow us. And so that's what it means to be the change. The win with heart was probably even more important to me because that's this notion that at a PR agency, consultancy, it's very competitive. People are competitive, they're jockeying for promotion, and we are always pitching against other firms. The only way you grow is by winning business from another firm. And so, you know, we work for Nike and Starbucks, but you know, we want to win the Procter & Gamble business. So to get this business, we have to pitch against another agency. So it is inherently very competitive, and you always want to win. But for me, it wasn't about winning at all costs. If our only goal was to win, if our only goal was to just get big, then we would not be fulfilling the purpose that I had established this agency for. And so this notion of have heart was just the way that I wanted people to behave. You know, if we grew, but it wasn't a place that people wanted to build a career, that they didn't find rewarding, then that wasn't enough. So have heart, to win with heart, is very much an important part of what we did. And so this slide just kind of explains, you can't really read it, but when, thanks Greeley for reading that part of my bio, it does indicate, like we had 15 staff in 2 offices when I joined the region, and then we had this really remarkable growth trajectory, and we grew 100-fold from about $1 million firm to about 170 million. So it was quite an achievement, but it was really because of this philosophy, I think, that you know, God blessed the agency, and anyway, we did really well. So the last part that I want to talk about is my time here at USC. So I was here you know, in Asia, 15 years based in Asia, but doing global communications for 34 years. And I kind of retired because it was time to just to move back to the U.S., to bring our family back together. My aging parents, who you saw on the first slide, were still with us back then. My father's now passed, but I wanted to spend time with them. And I thought that, you know, if there's any place that I could work at full time, it would need to be something that had a purpose that I was interested in, that a mission that I believed in, and so I gravitated to the notion of higher education. And I felt that I could make an impact. And you know, where better than to work for your alma mater? And at the time, when I was recruited to come to USC by President Folt and interim President Wanda Austin, we were going through a lot of challenges. You know, there were scandals, a lot of mistrust. I mean, we had to rebuild trust within all of our stakeholders: students, faculty, staff, alumni, everyone. Very, very difficult time. And I had done this with the agency that I was a part of, and so I thought, okay, why don't I give this a try? Why don't I join President Folt, help to rebuild this administrative team? There were some of our schools that were going through challenges. We had the medical school dean situation. We had the situation with our School of Social Work. I mean, you guys, those who have been here know there were a litany of challenges. And so, and many others that, you know, actually didn't even, the LA Times didn't cover. But it was so it was a difficult time. But you know, I felt that was a purpose for me to come back, and so I've been here for 6 years. And so I'm going to close with one story that I think is most reflective or representative of my time here at USC, and perhaps the most rewarding part. And it does tie back into this Asian American Heritage Month and to my family and my parents back at home. So it's about the USC Nisei initiative. So many of you will be familiar with that. It was where we tried to right a wrong. The university had neglected these Nisei students who had been incarcerated when they were studying at USC. We then didn't give them their transcripts. We didn't allow them to transfer. When they got out of the camps, they had to start all over again. We never apologized. Every other major university, every public university was required to give honorary degrees, but USC declined. President after president after president didn't want to do anything about that. But then when President Folt and I received a letter from a guy named John Kaji, who's now a council member in Torrance, and I think Grace has him speaking on Friday here on campus. But he sent the letter, and he'd been pushing for this for years, and it's a long story and a lot of missteps, but to be able to be involved in that and to right that wrong is so rewarding for me. And the design of this rock garden is very special. If any of you haven't been to the rock garden, it's behind the University Club. I'd be happy to give you a personal tour to explain all the symbolism behind it and how it talks about the perseverance of the Nisei students, the sense of family and community that was involved in it. All of the different aspects of the garden have representations that provide meaning into what they experience. And President Folt wanted to have something like that that would be a permanent reminder, not just of those Nisei students, but anybody that feels like they've been biased against, prejudiced just because of the color of their skin or their heritage, their background. And that's what that is. It's a quiet, reflective space here on campus. In this photo, you'll see, so Grace Shiba is there. Grace was so involved in this. I'm touring four-star General Paul Nakasone. General Nakasone was the highest ranked military, Japanese American in the U.S. military. And so he actually has a degree from USC, has a master's. And so he came to visit. He was really moved by it. He was like he was the commander of the U.S. Cyber Command, the director of the National Security Agency, very illustrious career. He just retired about a year ago. But we've had the chance to share it with many people, and they are always touched by this extra step that the university has taken to try to right the wrong. And so the final sidebar I'm going to share, and to kind of tie it back to the stories, I made a presentation about the Nisei Initiative. I was asked to speak with John Kaji at St. Mary's Episcopal Church in Koreatown. And this was the church that most of the Japanese Americans were attending back in 1940, 41, 42, during that period of time. Still has a lot of Japanese Americans in the congregation, and it was a USC faculty member that invited us to come by. And so we gave the presentation. It was really moving. And when we were visiting my mom, and Tricia was explaining to my mom what we had done, and she showed this video that of this presentation at this church. And as soon as my mom saw it and learned about the story, obviously she was touched. But even more so for her, when she learned it was the Episcopal Church, it was very special for her, and it gave her great meaning, because the reason that she came to the U.S. was because of the Episcopal Church in San Francisco, and she was invited by a pastor. And I had never known this. I just thought, well, she must have been an exchange student, or there must have been some summer program, like a study abroad, like Rachel's doing to Japan. No, they didn't have programs like that with Japan. You had to know somebody or get a special invitation. And that's what she had from that church. And so when she saw that, it gave her a tremendous amount of purpose, because she felt like, through, God used through me and her coming to the U.S. to just to create some comfort for these Japanese Americans and to try to right this wrong. And so it's a really nice closing story that shows how this all went together. And I just really believe that things that I've been fortunate enough to be involved in have been part of this plan, more orchestrated and not just haphazard. And so whatever I can do to work with others, to support your work, I want to do it because I think that's why I'm here. And essentially that's what matters to me and why. Thank you.